Hey everyone, this is Chiranjeevi, and in today's video we are going to talk about the Memento design pattern. So let's start by taking a look at the definition. So a memento is a behavioral design pattern that lets you capture the object's internal state without exposing its internal structure so that the object can be returned to this state later. So now this definition is quite simple, but in order to completely understand this concept of memento design pattern, I have included a small image in this video. So the image which you see here actually reflects the concepts of the memento design pattern. So let's we try to visualize this memento design pattern. All right. So the word memento means memory, and what memento design pattern is trying to do, it is trying to save previous memories of an object, right? So using the memento design pattern, you get an elegant way to actually save the states or save the changes in states for an object and keep it with yourself in a diary or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so whenever you want to save memories, you click pictures and save those pictures in a picture book. All right, so that's how we humans save memories. But with a program, the way you will try to save memory, you cannot click pictures, right? You have to create some snapshots for your current state and persist that somewhere. So this is the problem which memento design pattern is trying to solve. It gives you a way to save your application state from time to time, and you can switch back and forth between these states as you want. So let's take a look at this UML diagram, and then we will go ahead and create Memento design pattern from scratch using a set of steps for it. So in Memento design pattern, there are three entities. The first entity is the Memento itself, and what Memento here means is that memory or state you want to save. Okay, so Memento is the actual state which we will be persisting. The second entity is called the originator, and the originator's only job is to create an state. The originator is acting like a memento generator or memory generator. What originator will do is it will generate memories. And the third entity in this UML diagram you can see is a caretaker. So what caretaker, you can imagine it's like a picture diary or a photo book, and you can save all these memento states inside the caretaker. So caretaker will not have any way to change the memento states. We will not be providing any way to actually modify the states in the memento via caretaker. The caretaker's only responsibility is to have a set of memento or memories for an object we are trying to persist. So this is what the UML diagram means. Now let's take a look at a set of steps which will help us to actually implement this pattern. So I have broken down the implementation for Memento design pattern in 4 steps, and here they are. So we will go through each step one by one and make decisions according to the step choices, and finally at the end of step 4 we will be having a complete implementation for this Memento design pattern. So let's start with the first step. So the first step says create a Memento class with the required state you want to persist. So let's go ahead to our IDE and quickly create a Memento state. And the state which I am trying to save here is just a simple string. So let me create a string variable called state and provide a constructor for this. So let's take an argument for the state, and on initialization we will set this state to the coming state. And this is a very simple class which just holds a string variable which are we calling as a state. So Memento is actually a wrapper on this application state. Let's also go ahead and provide method to get the state. So we will say public string get state, and this will return me the current state. Let's add setter as well. So public void set state, and this takes a string parameter, and say this dot state is equal to state. So this is it. We are done creating the memento here, and this is the only thing which we need here. Since we are only persisting this state, we only want to track this changes in this state, we only have one variable here. If your memento can be very complex, you can have multiple variables and multiple data types persisted. So for this small example, I am going to stick with this string state, which will have the current state. Now let's go ahead to our steps list. So the first step is finished now. Now in the second part of this first step, we have to create an originator class which on save the state to a memento class. So let's quickly go ahead to our originator class. So this is our originator class, and here we are gonna write the code for the originator, which on save saves the state to a memento class. So let's quickly go ahead and write this. So for this originator, what I will do is I'll again have a string variable called article, and this article will be holding the current present article in the memento state. So let's have a default constructor for this, which only initializes it. Let's also have a setter for this article. So let's do string article, this dot article equals article. Along with the setter, let's go ahead and also create a getter. So this getter will simply return me the current article in the originator. Now on save, we need to save the state to a memento class. So let's go here and create a save method, and this will return me a new memento which takes the current article. Now notice here on save we are returning a memento object. So once we are implementing the caretaker class and the orchestrator method main, you will see how this helps. So we have created a save method which takes the current article from the originator and creates a new memento out of it, which you can also imagine as a memory. So we are creating a new memory with the current article. Along with the save method, I'd like to also add a restore method. So what this restore method does is it takes a memento object and resets the current originator state. So what this will do is this will set the current article to whatever the state is there in the memento. So now with this, our originator class is completely coded, and now we'll go to step 2 and implement that. So step 2 says make a caretaker class which has a list of memento states and a cursor pointing to the last known state. So let's quickly go to our caretaker class which I have already created, and let's try implementing this. So we will start coding here. So in the caretaker, what we want is a list of memento states and a cursor pointing to the last known state. So let's quickly go ahead and create an array list which I will be using to store mementos, and let's do an import for this. Okay, so now I am calling this state history. So I have an array list which I am calling history, and in this history I will be storing all these memento states. Now I also want to track the current state in this history object, so because I can go back and forth in this history object. So let's go ahead and provide a public constructor and initialize this history object. So in the public constructor, we'll be having this dot history is equal to new array list. Yeah. So now we are done with having a constructor for our caretaker. What we'll do now is add a method which will add a memento object to this history object. So we will just say public void add memento, which takes a memento m, and the only job of this method is to add this memento to the history object. Now since we have added this memento here, our current state is modified now. So this current state is basically storing the index at which our most recent memento is stored. So now this current state will be history.size, since we will be inserting the memento at the end of the array list. So this is how we can refresh the current state. Now let's go ahead and add a method to get the memento. So public memento, since we are getting a memento, get memento. And now we want to return a memento, so we will return history.get. Now since to get a memento we need the index, so we will take an index as a parameter and pass this index to the history array list. So now this will return me the state for which I am providing the index. So now along with adding and getting memento, let's add the most important piece for this caretaker, which is the undo and the redo. So let's first implement the undo. So public memento undo. Now inside this undo method, let's print a small logging statement which says undoing state. So we can see that in the console our undo method is being executed. And now if current state is less than 0 or it's equal to 0. Now since we are using an array list, we need to keep track of our bounds. So if we go out of bounds, there will be an error. So what we'll say here is current state is equal to 0. So we'll not let the state go less than 0, and we will return get memento of current state, or 0 you can say. Else if it's not the case, what we can do is we can reduce the current state and return a get memento for this current state. Now this memento will return me the last state or the previous state for the current state, because we are decrementing the current state index. Now similarly, let's go and provide a redo method. So redo method will also return a memento, and we'll call it a redo. Let's also add a small logging statement here as well, which says redoing state. Now similarly, as we are looking for the overflow in the undo method, we also have to check for the overflow in the redo method. So let's quickly go ahead and implement that. So we'll say current state, if it's greater than history.size -1, since we have a 0 indexed array, we want to set the current state again to the max value of the history object size. And then we will return the get memento, which is the utility method we created above, and pass the current state. So this is how we'll be handling overflow in the case of redo. And if this is not the case, we will simply increment the current state and we can return from the get memento, passing the current state. So this is how the redo and undo method looks like. So now we are done with step 2, and step 3 says provide methods to go forward and backward in the state timeline with undo and redo methods for the caretaker. So we have also implemented step 2 and step 3. So step 2 said that we need to create a caretaker class with array list of history objects which will store all the memento states. And step 3 says we need to provide a undo and a redo method to actually go forward and backward in the timeline for the memento. Now step 4 says create an originator and create a caretaker and create some steps and do undo and redo and demand based on the requirements. So now we are completely done with implementing the Memento design pattern, and now it's time to see this in action. So let's go ahead and go to our main method. So let's have a look at all our classes that they are implemented correctly, and all of them looks good. Yeah, so now let's go to our main method and let's start playing with our Memento pattern. So as the fourth step says, we need to create an originator and a caretaker object. So let's quickly go ahead and create an originator. Originator is new originator. And similarly, we need to create a caretaker object. So let's create a caretaker. Now, we need to instantiate the originator's article. So let's go ahead and set the article to some state. Let's call this state state1. Now, since we have set the article, we also need to save this state. So what we will say is we'll ask the caretaker to add a memento to its history object and call the originator.save method. Now, if you remember what this originator.save method does, it creates a memento from the current article. So now I want to save the current state and I am creating a memento out of it, and what I am saying is to the caretaker object, add this memento returned by the originator.save method. So now I have the current state in the caretaker's history object. Now let's go ahead and implement a utility method which will help us to actually show the state for the originator. So we'll say public static void print state, and this takes a originator reference, and what this method only does is it goes ahead and prints to the console the current state and o.get article. So that's the only job. Let's add a print line here. So the only job of this print state is to show the current state for the originator. So now we have saved this current states for the originator in the caretaker's history object. Let's go ahead and print the state for this originator. So we are passing this originator, and now let's try to run this program and let's see what happens. So if you see, our program is displaying current state state1. So since this is the only state, it is actually displaying this. So now let's go ahead and try to add more states to this program and then apply undo and redo methods on it. Let me copy this code here and let's add a state 2 and ask the caretaker object to add the memento here. And since this will again implement current state is state 2, let's go ahead and add some undo and redo methods. So what I want to do is originator.restore. I want to restore this state, and what I'll say here is caretaker.undo. So now what caretaker.undo will do is it will point the current cursor of the state to the previous state for whatever it was in the position. So I think I have named this variable incorrectly. So let me go ahead and correct it. And now let's go to the main method and say restore here. So now if you go ahead and print the state for the originator, what we will see is we will see current state is state 1 because we already set the article to state 1. It added a new state. Then we modified the state to state 2. And then we are doing an undo. So it will again roll back this change and it will come here. And this, if you try to print the current state of this originator, you will see state 1. So let's run this program and it should show state 1. So now you see that we have this small little text to undoing this state, and after undoing this state, you see that current state of the originator is state 1. Now you have seen that the undo methods works perfectly. Now at this point of time, we know that our current state is state 1. So now if we try to do a redo here, it will again go forward in time. So it jumped from state 2 to state 1 when we did an undo. Now if we do a redo here, it will again jump from state 1 to state 2. Now let's go ahead and run this program and see this in action. So yeah, so after redoing state, you see that the current state again jumps back to state 2. So now you can play around with this, creating multiple states and enjoy going backward and forward. So let me create some 4 or 5 states here, and let's call it 3, let's call this 4, let's call this 5, and let's call this 6. Now at this point of time, our current state is state 6. So let's run this program and see this in action. We'll see that current state is state 6. Now from here, if we undo 3 times, we should go back to current state 4. So let's go back and try to do an undo to reach state 4. Sorry, if we do undo 3 times, we'll not be having state 4, we'll be having state 3. So now let's go ahead and just do an undo over here. So we'll copy our undo code, and instead of printing each undo, let's only print after we are done undoing a certain number of times. So here we want to undo our state 3 times. So let's undo 3 times and then print the state. So now we'll be getting state 3. Let's go ahead and run this. And yeah, we are again back to state 3. So from 1, we went to 2, then we again went back to 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we did undo 3 times, we are at state 3. Now let's try one more time. Let's try redoing this 2 more times. So if we redo what we undo 2 more times, we'll be again back to state 5. So to finally see the answer, we need to print the state. So let's go ahead and actually do it. So now you see that after redoing state, we are again back to state 5. So this is the Memento design pattern. It lets you save memories of your object somewhere so that you can restore, go forward in memory, go backward in memory, and just do whatever you want with that saved application state. So this is what Memento design pattern is trying to solve. It gives you an elegant way to actually go forward and backward. Depends on your use case. Let's say you are designing a text editor application and you want to save the state for this modified text. You can keep your state in the Memento and just on Control Z or undo operation or on a redo operation, you can just go through the set of operations you already, or just go through the set of states you already have persistent in your caretaker. So I hope you have understood what this Memento design pattern is. It's a behavioral design pattern, as you all know, and it lets you capture the object's internal state without exposing its internal structure so that the object can be returned to this state later. And here you are with the Memento design pattern, with implemented from scratch using all these 4 steps. So that's it with the Memento design pattern. I hope to see you in the next one.